So you're analyzing this county by county, depending on their individual needs. There isn't some distribution for certain parts of the state over others. It's all being done on a case-by-case basis?
Absolutely.
Okay. Question on the anti-poverty initiative. Binghamton is one of the 10 cities that have been designated. We also were one of the initial pilot programs from last year. Do you know how the cities were chosen, the 10 cities?
I believe the cities were chosen based on the high concentration of poverty within the various areas.
I think one of the reasons why a lot of my colleagues are asking you about the capital component of that, we're sort of scratching our heads a little bit. I think it's fair to say that many of us think that we have in place some really terrific programs that would benefit people living in poverty, certainly through the entire economic regional process and all of the hearings and whatnot that we do over the years. I mean, there are several themes that keep coming up: childcare, of course, home visiting programs, transportation. So that's why you're going to keep being asked about capital. Do we really need to build something more? We really would rather see us support the known programs that have a history of doing well, that are clearly being underutilized. You know, every single one of us is asked a question about the potential use for potential benefit of various programs and how many are not being served. A question on the child care. Have you been following, I know we've had a conversation on this, but have you been following the conversation about the federal unfunded mandate regarding child care and the potential impact it may have on your agency and the ability to serve children and provide a number of slots that we've become accustomed to, but we're also hoping to increase as we go forward?
We are working with our sister agency, OCFS, of course you know, who was just here, is taking the lead on that effort. And so we are aware of the challenges in implementation of the federal changes.
And you are part of the conversation and are also aware that our estimates are well over $90 million, probably twice that much.
Limited visibility into it, but I am aware.
Okay. All right. And just one last comment. When you've been given a number of questions about the cuts to its facilitated enrollment, SUNY, CUNY, childcare, and other impacts, these are typically legislative ads that come out each year and get back each year. I mean, ultimately, I think many of us would like to see a system that just makes sense, that we don't have to keep, in a sense, playing games with this money. This is just important, should be a basic component of good government, good public policy. So ultimately, we'd love to have a conversation about developing a child care system that works on all levels, that includes all of these components. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Senator Squadron.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Just briefly, I note that this proposal, and I know that it's administered by Department of Health, but comes out of the budget. Nurse-Family Partnership is proposed at $1 million less than it was last year. Is that cut reflective of a feeling on the OTDA side that that's not an effective program?
Say the last part of the question.
Is that reflective of a feeling that it is not an effective program, not worthy of funding, or does that cut reflect something else?
No, we believe that it's an effective program. Absolutely.
Great. And settlement house funding as well, I notice, which helps settlement houses comprehensive lifelong services is cut $2.5 million. There's a real push, bipartisan in both houses, to get it to 3.5. Is that cut down to zero reflective that there's a belief that that funding is not well spent or not productive?
Again, a great program. I think there are tough choices that have to be made in the development of the budget, and so I think that that leaves it to the negotiation.
Thank you very much. There's always a negotiation, isn't there? And similarly, community service for the elderly, summer youth employment, and many of the programs we've heard about funded through the TANF. Same idea. There's no belief that those programs aren't worthy. They're just decisions made in the first step of a negotiation dance.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. On homelessness and the funding, just trying to understand here two things, and kind of simply, and I really look forward to the chart Senator Krueger asked for, and I really appreciate her providing some clarity into something where I've had trouble understanding it myself for sure. So just, if you can answer simply, I would really appreciate it, and any of the commissioners up there. Is this a strategy that's going to have an impact on homelessness in the short term or only in the long term?
I think it's both. I think there are components that help in the short term in that it's including rental subsidies that help families right now stay in the homes that they're in, as well as gain housing. So definitely short term, but obviously there's a long-term component to that.
How much are the rental subsidies?
How much?
The rental subsidies, what's the number?
It's approximately $200 million in this year, and that's a huge increase over where we were back in 2012, for instance, which was just around $100 million.
And compared to 2011?
I don't know what the comparison is there.
I mean, but that's, the
again,
number you're using is post the Advantage Housing Program ceasing to exist, right? For rental
Yes,
subsidies.
it's before my tenure, but I am familiar with it.
So it doesn't take into account that cut?
I think it does. I think Advantage went away. However, Advantage, again, was a rental subsidy program, and since it's gone away, I think the state has more than made a solid commitment to rental subsidies, and so it's funded at $200 million, projected at $200 million for 2016-17, which more than replaces Advantage.
And how much of that will be available in the city of New York, the 200?
I don't have the breakdown, but, you know, by and large, and I think Commissioner Rubin said, based on the need, a large portion of that, of course, would be in New York City.
Great. And do we know how many units that's going to help fund?
I don't have that in front of me, but it's easy enough to get to you.
But we don't know how many.
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
Okay. And in terms of the rental subsidy program, the shelter beds, the emergency shelter beds, and the supportive housing, just to be very, very clear, Senator Krueger was talking about a formula. At the end of the day, is that new money for localities, or does that replace any other funding that localities already get in any program at all?
How would you answer that, Amy?
I can speak most clearly, Senator, to the capital side of it, which is by far the largest amount of money. So in the 6,000 supportive beds, the 6,000 just for the next 5 years is about $2.5 billion of new capital funding. That is entirely new money that has never been appropriated before.
Great. Thank you. That's such a clear answer. I really appreciate it.
We strive for clarity.
And it's great news. On the other two, on the rental subsidies and the emergency beds, can I have an equally clear answer one way or the other?
Yes, those are, the resources are new for those.
Are new and in no way replace any other funding stream in any program at all?
Well, the rental subsidies are a continuation of programs that have been in place and are receiving increases going forward, so.
Right, but for example, they would not be offset in a reduction in public assistance dollars or any other fund, or the flexible fund for family services, or any other fund at all?
Correct.
Great, so that's new money, and just so I understand the amount of money it is, and I know my time is up, it's $100 million in new money for rental subsidies, eligible for localities across the state, and how much for the emergency shelter beds?
Well, that'll be determined once we find the locations and determine, you know, what those costs will be, so.
But the cash is sitting there, it'll go somewhere, and it won't
Yeah.
get offset against anything else?
Yes.
That's great, thank you for the clarity.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Senator Savino.
Thank you, Senator Young. I want to go back to the homeless issue and the new policy, not to discuss the housing issue. We discussed that extensively last week. But I'm curious as to who's going to be in charge of this new joint effort of inspecting shelters? Is that going to be the state? Will that be OTDA?
Well, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance is leading the effort, but it is a collaborative effort with the controllers. And so they will be making their selections of shelters based on information that we share with them. So once we complete our inspections, we will be sharing it with them, and they will be determining which shelters they would like to do their own inspections on.
But as you know, the majority of the shelters are in the city of New York. I think earlier you said it's 700 of the 900 around the state. Those shelters, did that also include the family hotel programs, or is that just shelters themselves?
It's going to include shelters themselves, and a portion of the hotels and motels will also be visited.
All right, so assuming the state inspects these shelters and they find the conditions are as bad as some of the homeless have claimed them to be, are you going to then take action and order them closed or some corrective action? Ultimately, the state does not have a contract with those shelters. It's the city of New York. So who's going to demand the action, the cleanup, the whatever the case may be?
It's the state's responsibility in order to oversee the districts in their provision of these services. So ultimately, the districts are responsible for making sure that the shelters are in a well-maintained condition. And so the state will be working directly with the district and providing them with instructions as far as the conditions that we find. For instance, we have done shelter inspections over the last couple of weeks. We have found deplorable conditions, and we have directed the social services districts to move those clients into better, more well-maintained housing. So.
Where would they put them, though? I mean, I'm assuming you don't have empty shelters somewhere to transfer them to. And I'm wondering, are we going to be shifting people to motels and hotels, which is something that was done, 20 years ago?
There is some fluidity to the way that the shelter intake process works, and so they have been successfully finding other locations for these clients. To date, there haven't been too many of those. However, as we continue our inspection initiative, we expect that definitely more will be found, and so therefore at that time I think we will need to work with New York City on a corrective action plan and finding out where they can identify those additional beds. And so I know that that's something that they are working on and something that they contemplate needing to happen. But I think our foremost concern is making sure people are safe and in well-maintained locations.
As it should be. I want to switch to the minimum wage. We've discussed it extensively with OPWDD, all of the human service agencies, the effect that the raising the minimum wage will have on your partner social service agencies or human service agencies and their inability to absorb it. So I don't need to remind you of that. We've said it a million times, and I'm sure we'll hear from some of them today. But I'm also concerned somewhat about those working people out there who are currently earning the statutory minimum wage of $9 an hour. So they're earning $9 an hour. If they're working a 40-hour week, they're earning $18,720. As a result of that, they're eligible for certain support services. And it's been mentioned more than once in the argument to raise the minimum wage that where the state is subsidizing many of these corporations by providing all sorts of benefits to these low-wage workers. So if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for these workers, which, by the way, I'm totally in support of, I think we need to establish a livable wage. But they are going to then jump from $18,720 for working a 40-hour week to $31,200 working a 40-hour week. Many of these jobs also require overtime, so they're going to go over that. There's a very real possibility, as you know, that they will lose all eligibility for assistance, which is going to force them to do one of two things. Reduce their work hours because they can't afford not to, lose the benefits, or they're going to quit. And so what can we do to look at the eligibility standards for assistance to stabilize families so that we don't give with one hand and take with the other?
I think we discussed this a little bit earlier, the fact that there are numerous work supports that are in place, and so a family who finds themselves ineligible for public assistance can still maintain child support again, child care payments for up to a year after. And so that gives them a long transition time. They can still be eligible for heat benefits, heating assistance benefits, as well as tax credits and other things. And, you know, just when you combine all those things, I think that is adequate.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I would, as I said, I would hate to see where on one hand we're giving, we're lifting people, and on the other hand, we're literally pressing them back down again. There's also going to be a corresponding effect to workers above it. You know, when you raise the floor, you raise the ceiling too. You know, and I just like to point out, just in your agencies alone, the starting salary for a job opportunity specialist, which is your eligibility specialist workers, people who determine who's eligible, in the city of New York is $35,000. And those are people who have to have a bachelor's degree, and they're making determinations. But under this, they would only be earning $4,000 more than a minimum wage worker. So I really think, I've said this continuously, we as a state need to look at what we're doing to attract people into the social service field and how we value those jobs. The idea that we're paying people minimum wage in some instances to take care of the elderly and provide home care services and, you know, direct support to the developmentally disabled is appalling. They should not be earning minimum wage. We can't recruit and retain these workers, which is critically important for the partner agencies. So I think as we move forward with this discussion, we have to take into consideration the effect of low wages on the delivery of social services in our state. Thank you.
Senator, for what it's worth, I obviously agree with your commitment to that particular to that sector, and you know, to refocus to a different part of the budget. We did talk a couple weeks ago about the affordable housing plan. It is absolutely the governor's commitment to make sure that that the vast majority of the new units that we create or preserve in New York City as well as elsewhere are targeted to the very low, and the extremely low income segments of the population. And it's for exactly the reason you mentioned. You cannot have a vibrant, growing city if you're not able to provide adequate housing to the people that are, you know, stuck at those income levels for whatever reason, whether it's because they're down in their luck or because they've chosen to enter fields that simply don't pay, you know, what other fields pay. So it's an incredibly important part of the, you know, of the workforce of the city, and so that's, you know, take it to the other part of the budget. That's why the governor made that commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Montgomery. And then we'll have Senator Kennedy to close.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I want to direct my question, I believe, to Commissioner Rudin in terms of housing, because that's what I know we're talking about homelessness, and I just want to emphasize that I'm really so excited and happy about the emphasis on looking at the homeless situation and the people who are sort of stuck there. But, you know, I think we have this huge crisis, certainly in my district and my part of the city. And it occurs to me that the homelessness is a symptom of another policy area that we have not really successfully addressed, I should say. Obviously, there is an increasing shortage of affordable housing. And there is this gentrification that is taking place, that has taken place. And that gentrification, aside from removing affordable housing and replacing it with luxury housing, essentially, market rate housing, it has increased the affordability of the housing that has not been gentrified. And so there is an increased number of evictions related to the fact that people can no longer just simply afford to live where they've lived for the last 20 years or so. And so we have this homelessness, and it's the homelessness of families, which is the most critical problem that we have. And so we've had this is not the first time that we have experienced this crisis in homelessness. But if we continue to treat it as if it's just episodal, right, and that it's going to go away somehow, and if we just invest in these shelter beds, that we're going to begin to correct this terrible situation. But at that time, we also began to invest much more specifically in the creation of affordable housing in partnership primarily, I believe, with the not-for-profit community housing developers and many of the supportive housing providers. I know about our city, the city in particular. So my question to you is, where are we with that process? And do we have projects in the pipeline? If so, where are they? And how many units are we talking about within that context? And what part of your plan includes a specific targeting of your partnering, once again, with not-for-profit community housing developers to develop affordable housing? And I don't mean a few units in a luxury building where they build a back door for the poor people to go into, the poor door people. Not that. I'm just talking about housing that is specifically for the purpose of creating an opportunity for poor people to live in our city.
So, Senator, there's so many issues packed into that question.
Yes, I realize that. I don't have much time, so I try to put everything in one question. No,
it's fine. I'm happy to be able to talk to all of them, or some of them. Let's see. So, I certainly couldn't agree more with your assessment of the problem, from the symptom, which is the lack of housing, down all through to the diagnosis, which is gentrification and economic conditions, yes, and just the grinding poverty that so many people in New York City and elsewhere suffer from. So what are we doing in this budget? What is the governor doing in this budget to address that? First, there's the budget itself, which is a 5-year, really an unprecedented 5-year, fully funded, as my colleague said, capital commitment to the development of new affordable housing. And it's as we've talked about before, it's before you even get to the special needs, it's $10 billion of new funding over 5 years for 100,000 units, both new and preserved. So that by itself is a significant contribution to New York City and outside of New York City's housing stock. You asked about non-for-profits. In terms of the affordability, I understand exactly why you're asking, and I think I mentioned before, the governor has made it clear that his commitment is to create affordable, as you say, housing, truly affordable housing. Yes. And so we anticipate that about 85% of the units that we create or preserve through that plan will be affordable at the levels of low, very low, and extremely low income people, depending on what that means where in the region where the housing itself is developed. As far as the nonprofit sector, which I share your commitment to the nonprofit sector. They are some of our greatest partners in this work. We fund nonprofits actually through some of our grant programs. I had the opportunity just now to look at the annual report that our NPP and RPP program puts out to talk about the good work that they've done in the last year, funding a lot of those local development agencies, some of which I know Senator Young knows well. Those are, in many places, particularly in rural areas, but also in the city, some of our greatest partners in the work of developing and preserving affordable housing and making home ownership opportunities available to people of low income. And obviously we will continue at higher levels because that's what's in the budget, to fund those agencies for the coming years to take advantage of the affordable housing plan that the governor laid out. And then as far as just more generally, even for those groups that are not recipients of our grant funding, many of our applicants for our funding programs, just by the nature of the programs themselves, are nonprofits. In fact, most are. They're usually either paired by themselves or they are paired with a for-profit developer, and we do our best to work with them. They are some of the most sophisticated developers there are, actually, and we work very closely with them to make sure that they know of our funding availability well in advance of our issuance of the RFPs, and then to how to take advantage of those programs. In fact, you should know we've had a series of conferences in the last few months, not in New York City, but in I'm now going to blank on where we've done them, but we've done 3: Utica, I think Rochester and perhaps one other, and then we've got about 10 others coming up over the next year, specifically for the purpose of bringing our agency staff and other agency staffs out into the field at the direction of the governor to meet with representatives of local non-for-profits to explain to them exactly how to take advantage of government funding for the reasons that you said, because for those agencies that haven't yet gotten into our pipeline, we need to make sure that they have the ability to do that, and that's really critically important work. The one thing I'll say finally, you've talked at the beginning about gentrification. It's a serious issue, obviously, particularly in a place like New York City where real estate values continue to go up, but we're also seeing it in many of the other outside of New York City cities that are experiencing growth, economic growth. I will take this opportunity to talk about the good work that our tenant protection unit does, as I did at my budget hearing. They're not here to take the credit today as they were 2 weeks ago, but they do an enormous amount of good work to protect against illegal harassment, which often results in eviction or effective eviction where somebody shuts off the heat in the middle of winter, something like that. We are active participants in a task force with the Attorney General's office and with the city HPD to do the same thing, and it's all in the interest of combating the dynamic that you just described. So I think if I've ticked off all the issues, I think I agree with you on everything, and I'm glad that you raised those issues.
Yes, and I just would like also to know if you have projects that are in the pipeline that we can sort of look at that.
Sure.
And determine when we might be able to look forward to you're addressing this in other than looking at shelter beds.
Sure. So we have a very active pipeline, and I think probably I'd be best to come back to you in person with our staff or something and talk about it.
That would be very helpful.
Happy to do it, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kennedy, to close.
Thank you very much. Deputy Director, I want to touch on the anti-poverty initiative. I'm very pleased that this is underway, especially coming out of the district that I represent, where there's a very high propensity for poverty in certain areas of the district. So we have been working collectively with the community and with various levels of government to attack poverty at its base root. So I want to talk about the initiative and the funding for providing the planning and implementation for this anti-poverty initiative. Mm-hmm. It's at the $500,000 level. How do you feel that this implementation can be realized with that level, $500,000? When you look at a city like Buffalo, which you're funding at the $500,000 level when Rochester was at $750,000 and is still in the initial phases of this. Can you just talk to a little bit about that, where that $500,000 number came from, and if that number is adequate?
We believe that the amount is adequate to at least see the planning and implementation effort in each one of these communities. It's a place to start. Might these communities need more? Possibly. However, $500,000 will allow them to bring the appropriate parties together and to engage in a really meaningful planning process. And so we are hopeful that that seed money will provide an avenue for them to create a roadmap for anti-poverty within their local community. But I understand where you're going with that.
So the city of Rochester, just around its local strategic plan, they're yet to move past that, and the rest of the initiative is being modeled off of that. Now, everything I've heard about Rochester is very positive, so don't get me wrong here, but there's still it's slow in evolving into the implementation phase, and we need to attack this in a very aggressive nature. And there's organizations like the United Way that are on the front lines that are already working in a collaborative fashion with local governments, with state government, with various agencies at a local level. Why not allow the United Way to be the leading partner in this sort of initiative, and why open the process up now?
I think that community-based organizations, including United Way, will play an important part in that planning effort. However, we don't want to dictate statewide one particular entity in order to lead that effort. I think that that is more appropriately grown out of the local community and what their needs are. But I fully expect that United Way, as well as other community-based organizations, will be right there leading the effort and helping.